The royal transport descended through the docking bay of Neutral Station Omega-7 with the grace of a falling leaf. Its polished hull, reflecting the cold lights of the massive space station that served as neutral ground for the greatest powers in the Galaxy Princess. Virala of the Cathvari Ascendancy stood at the transport's exit ramp, her four eyes scanning the reception area with barely concealed impatience. Her iridescent scales shifting from deep purple to irritated crimson as she took in the sight before her. She was royalty, third in line to the throne of an empire that spanned 40 star systems. And she had been sent to represent her people at the most important peace summit in a century. A gathering that would determine the fate of billions. Her own guards flanked her on either side. Magnificent specimens of Cathvari warrior breeding, each standing nearly 8 feet tall with exoskeletons that could deflect plasma fire and claws that could tear through starship hulls. Their presence alone enough to make lesser species trembled. The Galactic Council had insisted on providing additional security for all diplomatic delegates, and Virala had expected something impressive. Perhaps a squad of Valorian cyber soldiers with their gleaming augmentations. Or maybe a pack of Azuek Hive warriors with their infamous acid glands instead. Standing alone at the edge of the docking bay in simple dark clothing, she saw human Varia's scales flickered with disbelief as she descended the ramp, her silk robes trailing behind her, her jeweled headdress catching the station lights, every inch of her radiating the power and prestige of her ancient bloodline. The human stepped forward and inclined, his head in a gesture of respect that seemed almost quaint. "Your Highness," he said in a voice that carried no particular emotion, "I am Marcus Cole, formerly of Earth's Frontier Corps, and I have been assigned as your security liaison for the duration of the summit." Virala stopped walking and stared at him with all four of her eyes, taking in every disappointing detail of his appearance. He was average height for his species, perhaps 6 feet tall, which meant he barely reached the chest of her Cathvari guards. And his build was lean rather than muscular, his frame unaugmented by any visible technology or biological enhancement. He wore no armor, carried no visible weapons beyond a simple knife at his belt, and displayed none of the obvious markers of combat capability that she had come to expect from security personnel. His face was unremarkable. His hair was cut short and practical, and his eyes were a common shade of brown that held no particular intensity or threat. He looked like a clerk, Virala thought, or perhaps a maintenance worker who had wandered into the wrong section of the station. "Is this some kind of joke?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to make her attach wince and her guards shift uncomfortably. Human's expression did not change. "I assure you, Your Highness, the Galactic Council takes your security very seriously." "Then why have they sent me a human?" Virala snapped, making no effort to hide her contempt. "I have seen your species before. Soft creatures from a minor world on the edge of explored space. And you expect me to believe that you can provide meaningful protection." She gestured toward her Cathvari guards with one elegant hand, her claws catching the light. "Look at my warriors. Human, they are bred for combat. Their bones are reinforced with natural metals. Their exoskeletons can withstand artillery fire, and their reflexes are 3 times faster than any unmodified species in the galaxy." She turned to point at a delegation arriving at a nearby platform, a group of tall figures with gleaming chrome limbs and glowing optical implants. "Those are Valorian cyber soldiers. Their neural processors can calculate 1,000 combat scenarios in the time it takes you to blink, and their bodies contain enough weaponry to level a small building." Her attention shifted to another group, insectoid beings that moved with disturbing coordination, their mandibles dripping with caustic fluids. The Artaka bring their acid spitters, creatures that can dissolve through a battle tank and share a hive mind that makes them impossible to surprise or outmaneuver. She turned back to Marcus, Her scale is now a deep shade of insulting orange, and the humans send one man with no armor, no augmentations, and no apparent skills beyond the ability to stand quietly and waste my time. Her attach, a nervous Kethvari diplomat named Serevanal, stepped forward with a placating gesture. Your Highness? Perhaps the Council has its reasons. The humans have been gaining influence in recent years, and their inclusion in security matters may be a political consideration rather than a practical one. A political consideration, Virala repeated, her voice dripping with venom. So I am to be saddled with this creature as some kind of gesture toward inclusivity while my actual security depends on real warriors. She looked at Marcus again, expecting to see embarrassment or anger or some reaction to her words, but his face remained perfectly calm, as if she had been discussing the weather rather than insulting him to his core. I understand your concerns, Your Highness, he said in that same neutral tone. I will do my best to stay out of your way. See that you do, Virala replied. Already turning away from him, Serevanal, have my quarters prepared, and make certain this human is assigned somewhere far from my sight. I will not have visiting delegates thinking that I rely on such inadequate protection. As she swept away toward the diplomatic wing, her guards falling into formation around her. She did not look back at the human standing alone in the docking bay. Marcus Cole watched her go, his expression unchanged, his posture relaxed, his breathing steady and calm. When the princess and her entourage had disappeared around a corner, he pulled out a small datapad and began studying the station's layout, noting the locations of ventilation shafts, maintenance corridors, emergency exits, and security blind spots. He had arrived 3 days before the princess, posing as a maintenance contractor, and in that time he had walked every corridor of the station, memorized every face of every worker, and identified 7 individuals whose behavior did not match their stated roles. 2 of them were already dead, their bodies hidden in places where they would not be found until long after the summit had concluded. The princess thought he was useless, and that was fine. Marcus Cole had learned long ago that being underestimated was the greatest advantage a human could have. He finished his notes, tucked the datapad away, and followed at a distance that would keep him out of sight but close enough to respond. If needed, the summit would last 5 days. He intended to keep the princess alive for every single one of them, whether she appreciated it or not. The first 3 days of the summit passed in a blur of formal dinners, diplomatic meetings, and elaborate ceremonies designed to showcase the wealth and power of each attending species. Princess Virala moved through these events like a jewel among stones, her scales shimmering with carefully chosen colors that communicated confidence and authority, her words sharp and precise in negotiations that would shape the future of interstellar trade routes. She was in her element, a master of political maneuvering, and she made certain that everyone around her knew exactly how important she was. The human, Marcus Cole, she treated like furniture during the grand reception on the second evening, when delegates from 30 different species mingled in a ballroom filled with floating lights and exotic music. Virala positioned him at the far end of the room, near the service entrance where the catering staff came and went when the Valorian ambassador inquired about the human standing alone in the corner. Virala laughed with practiced elegance. A formality, she said, waving one clawed hand dismissively. You know how the council loves its inclusive gestures. They insisted I accept a human liaison, and I did not wish to cause a diplomatic incident by refusing outright. The Valorian's chrome face shifted into an expression that might have been amusement. Humans are curious creatures, he observed, his optical implants whirring as they focused on Marcus across the room. They have no natural advantages that I can detect, no claws or armor or venom. And yet they seem to be everywhere these days. Like vermin, Virala agreed, her scales rippling with cruel humor. Harmless, but persistent, across the room. Marcus stood with his back to the wall, his eyes moving slowly across the crowd, cataloging faces and movements and patterns that no one else seemed to notice. He watched a dark Tka servant who lingered too long near the Kethvari delegation's table, and he noted that the servant's movements did not match the hive-synchronized patterns of its supposed colony. He observed a maintenance technician who checked the same ventilation panel 3 times in 1 hour, always when the room's attention was focused elsewhere. Tracked the waiter whose tray never seemed to empty, no matter how many drinks were taken from it, suggesting that the waiter was not actually serving anyone. These observations went into his memory alongside hundreds of others, building a picture of potential threats that grew clearer with each passing hour. On the 3rd morning, Virala found him studying a datapad in the corridor outside her quarters, and her irritation boiled over into open mockery. "Still here?" she demanded, her scales flashing with annoyance. "I had hoped you might have found something more useful to do with your time. Perhaps polishing the floors or cleaning the waste recyclers." Marcus looked up from his datapad without any change in expression. "I am reviewing the station's architectural plans," he said. "The ventilation system has several access points that are not adequately monitored." "How fascinating," Virala replied with exaggerated boredom. "Tell me, human, are you planning to hide in the ventilation ducts if there is trouble? Is that the extent of your security strategy? Understanding the environment is essential to effective protection," Marcus said. "Protection?" Virala scoffed. "What exactly do you imagine you could protect me from? You have no weapons beyond that pathetic knife, no armor, no augmentations. And I have seen your species struggle to open sealed containers." She stepped closer to him, using her greater height to look down at him with all 4 of her eyes blazing with contempt. "My guards could tear you apart in seconds. A single Valorian cyber soldier could calculate 17 different ways to kill you before you could draw your next breath. And even the weakest Artificadron could dissolve your flesh with a single spray of acid." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You are soft. Human. Your bones break easily, your skin tears like paper, and your bodies are so fragile that a moderate fall can kill you. What possible threat could you hope to counter that my real protectors cannot handle 1,000 times better?" Marcus considered her words for a moment before responding with respect. "Your Highness, the greatest threats rarely come from the directions we expect. Spare me your primitive wisdom." Virala snapped. "Just stay out of my way, and try not to embarrass yourself or me during the remaining days of this summit." She swept past him, her robes brushing against his arm as if he were nothing more than a piece of unwanted furniture. And Marcus watched her go without comment that night. While the princess slept in her secure quarters, Marcus made his way through the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the diplomatic wing. He moved in complete darkness, navigating by memory and touch, his footsteps silent on the metal grating near Junction 7. He found what he was looking for, a figure crouched in the shadows, its body modified in ways that made it nearly invisible to thermal sensors, its hands holding tools designed to bypass security systems. The figure never heard Marcus approach. There was a brief struggle, so quiet that it would not have registered on the most sensitive audio equipment. And then there was stillness. Marcus disposed of the body in the station's industrial recyclers, cleaned his hands, and returned to his post outside the princess's quarters before the first shift change of the morning. When Virala emerged for breakfast, she found him standing exactly where she had left him, his expression calm, his posture relaxed, his clothing showing no sign of the night's activities. "You look tired," she observed with false concern. "Perhaps standing guard all night is too demanding for human endurance. I am fine." "Your Highness," Marcus replied. She rolled her eyes and walked past him without another word behind her. Marcus allowed himself a small moment of dark amusement. The princess had no idea that she had slept peacefully only because he had spent the night killing the assassin who had been hours away from compromising her quarter's security systems. She did not need to know, she only needed to survive, and Marcus intended to make certain she did, no matter how many bodies he had to leave in the station's recyclers to ensure it. The fourth night of the summit brought a formal dinner that would determine the final terms of the trade agreement, and Princess Varela prepared for it with the intensity of a general preparing for war. Her scales had been polished until they gleamed like precious gems. Her robes were woven from the silk of creatures that lived only on her homeworld, and her headdress contained enough wealth to purchase a small moon. She looked magnificent, and she knew it. The dinner itself was a triumph of diplomacy, with Virala navigating the complex web of alien interests with skill that earned grudging respect from even her rivals. And by the time the final course was served, she had secured terms that would benefit her people for generations to come. She was in excellent spirits as she left the dining hall, her HFY guards forming a protective triangle around her, their massive forms casting long shadows in the corridor lights, the human trail behind in a distance, as always, barely visible on the edges of her awareness. A successful evening, her attaché Serevanal said, his scales glowing with satisfaction. The Valorians conceded on the shipping lanes, and the Artahatika agreed to reduce their tariffs by 15%. It was adequate, Virala replied, though her scales betrayed her pleasure with soft pulses of gold. Tomorrow we will finalize the agreements and return home with honor. They turned down a secondary corridor, a shortcut to the diplomatic quarters that avoided the crowded main passages. It was a route they had taken every night of the summit, and the guards had cleared it before the princess left the dining hall. They did not know that the bodies of the security team who had performed that clearance were already cooling in a maintenance closet 2 levels below. The lights died without warning. Complete darkness swallowed the corridor, so absolute that Virala could not see her own hand in front of her face. Guards, she commanded, her voice sharp with sudden alarm. Lights. Her HFY warriors activated their bioluminescence, a natural ability of their species that caused their exoskeletons to emit a pale blue glow, and the corridor was illuminated just enough for Virala to see the shapes dropping from the ceiling. There were 12 of them. They fell from the ventilation shafts with perfect synchronization, their bodies unfolding from positions that should have been impossible. Their forms twisted and modified into something that was no longer quite organic. Virala recognized them instantly, and her heart froze in her chest. Shralkat. The death cultists were legendary across the galaxy, assassins who surrendered their original bodies to become perfect killing machines, their bones replaced with molecular edge blades that can extend from any joint, their blood converted to paralytic venom, their nervous systems rewired to feel nothing but the satisfaction of a successful kill. They were ghosts, nightmares, the shadows that haunted the sleep of emperors and presidents and kings, and they had come for her. Protect the princess, the lead HFY guard roared, and all 3 warriors surged forward to meet the threat. The first guard managed 2 steps before a Shralkat was on him, bone blades sliding between the plates of his exoskeleton with surgical precision, finding the gaps that even the finest armor could not eliminate. And the massive warrior collapsed with a gurgling sound that Virala would hear in her nightmares for years to come. The second guard fired his plasma rifle once, the shot illuminating the corridor in brilliant blue light. But the Shralkat moved like liquid darkness, flowing around the blast and closing the distance in a heartbeat. And then the guard's head was no longer attached to his body. The third guard, the largest and oldest of her protectors, a veteran of 30 campaigns who had served her family since before she was born, lasted almost 4 seconds. He killed one of the assassins. his claws tearing through its modified flesh before it could dodge. But the others swarmed him from 3 directions at once, and Virala watched in horror as his body was carved apart by blades that moved too fast for her eyes to track. 8 Shrallcat remained. They turned toward her as one, their movements perfectly synchronized, their blade arms extending with wet clicking sounds that spoke of death. Serevinal screamed and ran. He made it 3 steps before a thrown blade caught him in the back, and he fell without another sound. Virala pressed herself against the wall, her scales cycling through colors so fast that she seemed to strobe in the dim light, her heart's pounding in a triple rhythm that felt like it might tear her chest apart. She was going to die, after centuries of her bloodline, surviving wars and assassinations and palace coups. She was going to die in a corridor of a neutral station, killed by cultists whose employers she would never know. The Shrallcat advanced slowly now, savoring the moment, their featureless faces showing no emotion as they closed in on their target. Virala did not see Marcus move one moment. He was somewhere behind her, a forgotten shadow in the darkness, a useless human who had never mattered. The next moment he was among the assassins, and the screaming began, not her screaming, theirs. The Shrallcat were engineered for killing in ways that made them terrors across the known galaxy. They had studied the combat techniques of 100 species, their neural modifications allowing them to predict and counter every known fighting style, their bodies rebuilt to exploit the weaknesses that every organic creature possessed. They had killed Kethvari warchiefs in battle armor, Valorian cyber commanders with military-grade combat processors, Fnurtho hive queens. Surrounded by thousands of drones, they had never encountered anything like Marcus Cole. The first assassin died before it understood what was happening. Marcus had drawn his knife in the darkness between one heartbeat and the next, and by the time the blade caught the dim bioluminescent light, it was already buried to the hilt in the gap between the Shrallcat's skull plates. The assassin dropped, and Marcus was already moving, using the falling body as a shield against the second attacker's strike. The bone blade meant for his chest instead pierced the corpse of its ally, and in the moment of confusion that followed, Marcus grabbed the second Shrallcat's extended arm and twisted. Sound of snapping bone echoed through the corridor. Before the assassin could recover, Marcus had driven the broken end of its own arm through its throat. A brutal improvisation that no combat algorithm could have predicted. 2 down, the remaining Shrallcat adapted instantly, their hive-trained coordination allowing them to process the threat and respond as a unit. 3 and 4 attacked together, their blade arms weaving patterns designed to corner prey and eliminate escape routes. Marcus did not try to escape. He dropped low, below the arc of their strikes, and his knife flashed twice in the blue light. 3 collapsed with severed tendons, unable to stand, and Marcus used its falling body to tangle 4's legs, creating a pile of limbs that he exploited with savage efficiency. Killed 3 with a knife through the eye, and 4 with a crushing blow to the throat. Movements so fast and precise that they seemed almost casual. 5 hissed a warning to the others and sprayed paralytic venom from the glands in its modified wrists. Marcus was no longer there. He had read the muscle tension in 5's arms, recognized the preparation for the spray, and moved before the attack even launched. The venom caught 6 instead, and the assassin convulsed and fell, its nervous system overwhelmed by the toxin. It was supposed to be immune to 5, died with its own bone blade buried in its chest, torn from its arm by a human who should not have possessed the strength to accomplish such a thing. Virala watched from her place against the wall, her 4 eyes wide with disbelief, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The human was bleeding now, a long slash across his left arm where 7 had managed to land a strike. But he did not seem to notice. He did not slow down. He did not show pain. He simply killed. 7 and 8 attempted a pincer maneuver, attacking from opposite sides with the precision of creatures who had practiced such coordinated assaults thousands of times. Marcus let them come at the last possible moment. He stepped sideways in a direction that should have been blocked, grabbed Seven by its extended blade arm, and pivoted with his entire body. Seven's momentum carried it forward, and each strike, meant for Marcus, instead drove through its ally's back. Marcus released Seven and caught 8 by the throat, his fingers finding pressure points that the Shralket's modifications had not protected. And the assassin went limp in his grip. He dropped the body and turned to face the remaining 4-9, was still twitching from the paralytic venom. Marcus killed it with a single efficient motion, a mercy that none of the assassins would have shown him. 10, 11, and 12 spread out, abandoning their coordinated tactics in favor of surrounding their target, their modified brains finally recognizing that standard approaches were not working. They were learning, adapting, but they were adapting to a human. And humans have been adapting to threats for longer than any of them could comprehend. 10 attacked first, its blade arms a blur of molecular edge. Death. Marcus caught the first strike on his knife, deflected the second with his forearm in a way that should have severed the limb, but instead turned the blade aside and drove his forehead into 10's face with enough force to shatter the bone structure beneath. While 10 staggered, Marcus grabbed it by the throat and jaw and twisted. The crack of breaking vertebrae was loud. The sudden silence. 11 and 12 hesitated. It was a mistake that would have been impossible for their kind even moments before. A hesitation born of something that the Shralket were not supposed to feel. Fear. Marcus gave them no time to recover. He covered the distance between them in 2 strides that seemed to eat the space itself. And what followed was not a fight, but an execution. 11's blade found only air as Marcus flowed around it. And then the human was behind the assassin, one arm around its throat, the other gripping its sculpt. 12 was alone. The last Shralket looked at the human standing among the bodies of its cult siblings, looked at the knife in his hand that was dark with blood, looked at the expression on his face that showed no anger or triumph or satisfaction, only patience. 12 attacked anyway, because that was what Shralket did. It died anyway, because that was what happened to those who attacked Marcus Cole when it was over. The human stood in a corridor painted with blood, his breathing only slightly elevated, his wounded arm hanging at his side. 12 bodies arranged around him like offerings to some ancient god of war. He turned to face the princess, and his voice was as calm as it had been on the day they first met. "Your Highness," he said, "we should relocate. There may be more." Virala could not find words. She could only stare at the human she had dismissed as useless, the soft creature from a minor world, the unaugmented weakling who had just killed 12 of the most feared assassins in the galaxy. And she realized, with a cold clarity that would change her forever, that she had never truly understood what humans were. The hours that followed the attack passed in a blur of security alerts, emergency protocols, and frantic diplomatic activity. Station security swarmed the blood-soaked corridor, their scanners cataloging the carnage with mechanical efficiency, while investigators attempted to piece together what had happened. The bodies of 12 Shralket assassins were documented and removed, each one a testament to a level of violence that none of the security officers had ever witnessed. The council dispatched emergency response teams. The other delegations were placed under protective lockdown, and the summit was suspended while authorities attempted to determine who had hired the death cultists and whether more attacks were planned through all of it. Princess Varela Aladders sat in a secured room in the station's command center, surrounded by guards from half a dozen species, her scales locked in a pale shade of gray that indicated profound shock. She had not spoken since Marcus led her away from the corridor of bodies. The human himself sat across from her, allowing a medical technician to clean and bandage the wound on his arm, his expression unchanged from the calm, Neutrality she had come to associate with him, but now that expression meant something different to her. Now she understood that the calm was not passivity or acceptance or submission. It was control. The medical technician finished her work and departed, leaving Virala alone with the human for the first time since the attack. And the silence stretched between them like a living thing. "How?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The first word she had spoken in hours. Marcus looked at her with those ordinary brown eyes that she now knew could watch death approach without flinching. "Your Highness, how did you do that?" Virala demanded, her voice growing stronger as the shock began to transform into something else. "A desperate need to understand. The Shralket have killed Valorian cyber soldiers with military-grade combat implants. They have assassinated Kethvari war chiefs wearing full battle armor. They have slaughtered creatures 10 times your size with natural weapons that could tear through starship hulls." She leaned forward, her 4 eyes fixed on him with an intensity that would have made most creatures look away. "You are human. Your species has no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no augmentations. You are soft and slow and fragile compared to almost every other sentient species in the galaxy. And yet you killed 12 of them in less than 2 minutes." She paused, her scales shifting to a confused mix of colors. "How is that possible?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "Do you know what a persistence predator is?" "Your Highness." Viral Ash shook her head. "Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day of our existence," Marcus said, his voice calm and factual, as if he were discussing weather patterns rather than the nature of his species. "Our planet has extreme temperatures, violent weather, toxic plants, venomous creatures, diseases that could wipe out entire populations, and predators that saw us as nothing more than easy meals." He shifted slightly in his seat, and Virala noticed for the first time how economical his movements were, how every gesture contained no wasted energy. "We had no armor, so we learned to move and hide and strike from shadows. We had no claws, so we made weapons from stone and wood and eventually metal. We had no venom, so we learned to use the poisons of other creatures against our enemies. Many species adapt to their environments," Virala Letters said, though her voice lacked its earlier dismissiveness. "True," Marcus agreed. "But humans adapted differently. We became persistence predators, hunters who could not outrun our prey or overpower them in direct confrontation. So instead we followed them for hours, for days, across any terrain, in any weather, until they collapsed from exhaustion and we could kill them at our leisure." He met her eyes without blinking. "We evolved to endure, Your Highness, to suffer and continue, to take damage that would incapacitate other species and keep fighting. Our bodies may be fragile, but our minds learn to ignore pain, to suppress fear, to focus on survival above all else." Virala thought of her fallen guards, massive warriors bred for combat, killed in seconds by creatures who had spent years training to be perfect killers. Then she thought of the human who had walked among those same killers and left them all dead. The Shralket trained for 10 years to become assassins, Marcus continued. They studied combat like a science. They modified their bodies to be weapons. They learned to predict and counter every known fighting style. A high ghost of something that might have been amusement crossed his face. The problem with that approach is that humans invented combat. Every technique, every trick, every brutal improvisation that has ever existed in warfare, we created it. We spent 100,000 years fighting and dying and killing. Not just other predators, but each other. In conflicts so vast and terrible that the death tolls would be unimaginable to most species. He gestured at the bandage on his arm. The Shralket learned to kill. They studied it, practiced it, perfected it, But humans, we evolved to survive. Killing is just something we do along the way. Varla was silent for a long moment, processing his words when she spoke again. Her voice had lost all trace of the contempt she had shown him since his arrival. "I owe you an apology," she said, and the words came harder than any diplomatic negotiation she had ever conducted. "I treated you shamefully from the moment you arrived. I dismissed you as worthless. I mocked you publicly. I relegated you to the status of furniture." Her scales flushed with shame. "And despite all of that, you protected me. You killed for me. You could have let them take me, and no one would have blamed you after the way I behaved. You were wrong about me," Marcus said simply. "That is not a crime. Many species underestimate humans when they first encounter us. And the second time they encounter you, that ghost of amusement returned to his eyes. There usually is not a second time, despite everything that had happened." Viola found herself making a sound that might have been a laugh. "I have been a fool," she said. "You have been taught that strength looks a certain way," Marcus replied. "Size, armor, augmentation, visible weapons. It is not foolish to believe what you have been taught. It is simply incomplete." He stood, testing his wounded arm with a small rotation of the shoulder. "If you will excuse me, Your Highness, I should coordinate with station security regarding the remaining threat assessment." He turned toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. "For what it is worth, you handled yourself well during the attack. Many would have run or screamed or frozen. But you stayed calm and stayed out of my way. That saved your life as much as anything I did." And then he was gone, leaving Viola alone with her thoughts and a completely new understanding of the galaxy she lived in when she returned to the Kethvari Ascendancy 3 days later. She brought with her a formal request to the Galactic Council. All future diplomatic missions involving Kethvari royalty would include human security personnel. Request was granted without debate. Word spread, as it always did in the halls of galactic power. And other species began to take notice of the soft creatures from the minor death world on the edge of explored space. They started paying attention to the humans, who walked quietly among them. The unassuming figures with no armor or claws or visible augmentations in humans like Marcus Cole continued their work in the shadows, protecting those who needed protection, eliminating threats before they could materialize, and occasionally reminding the galaxy that the most dangerous creatures were not always the ones who looked the part. The universe was vast and old, and filled with wonders beyond counting, and humanity was just getting started.